to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from Maxed Out Man Podcast. This is episode number 12, and today we're talking with Brandon Peele. So we've tried a couple of times to get together, so I appreciate you working with me, making sure this works out. So Brandon is a public speaker, keynote speaker. He does all sorts of things. His day-to-day includes public speaking, business development, purpose activation, leadership development, writing, research, marketing, fundraising, et cetera, right? Like that's, I think if any of us that are entrepreneurial by nature, that kind of explains that. He's the co-founder of Unity Lab. Unity Lab empowers organizations to solve their retention, engagement, inclusion, and mental health challenges. They create cultures of purpose, empathy, and trust, and empower each employee to feel a sense of belonging no matter where they work. So super interested to learn more about that. You know, this isn't necessarily a business only type podcast, but the goal here is that we want to inspire guys, teach them new things, educate them. And I think your insight, not only for those guys that are listening that may be management, owners, that kind of thing, but also just as an employee, and just overall how we interact with each other in a very divided culture, right? Like, yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people. I've had like 4 guests lately from the UK, and their common theme is, man, you guys are freaking nuts over there. And I tend to agree. Every day gets a little bit more interesting. So, hey, thanks for coming. Give me a little bit more of your background. I know I just did a very cursory one, but let's get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah. So originally from the Midwest, grew up in Illinois, and began my young adulthood chasing the American dream like a lot of folks. Thought it was all about going to a good school, making a bunch of money, marrying your college sweetheart, moving her out to the burbs, and then dying on a golf course someday. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And nothing, some folks that's fully, that's fulfilling for them. It wasn't for me. So in my 20s, I began to really start to question this, prescribed model of masculinity or what it means to be an adult, and looked around and really didn't see a lot of like grown ass men. Mm-hmm. Like they were biologically mature, successful, respected, but like didn't know themselves. Didn't have a sense of what their life was for, other than like my kids, which is of course everybody. That's right. A part of meeting,
right?
And so in my late 20s, I began to start to pull back the curtain and do a bunch of self-development work, and that has been pretty much a mainstay of my life for the past 20 years. And since then, I've gone on to do lots of stuff around purpose and leadership. Mm-hmm. So today, what that looks like is, as you said, leading, or I should say co-leading Unity Lab, helping mission-driven organizations activate the purpose of their employees and help them connect that with the work that they do in the organization's mission. Also do a lot of keynote speaking, increasingly being brought in to facilitate CEO circles, which is very interesting. And I also just started a fellowship with Citizen University up in Seattle to learn how to minister the soul of the nation. As you mentioned, it's like very sick, divided. Yeah. So that's the short of it.
Nice. And that's, so you're dealing with, so when you say mission-driven organization, I'm interested to know I'm guessing that all organizations think they're mission-driven, but I'm also guessing that that's not true.
Yeah. So the way that my colleagues and I think about it, there's like a maturity model, right? Mm-hmm. So there are folks that on one end do not care about who they hurt, who they exploit, how badly they mess up the planet just to enrich shareholders. And on the other end, there are folks who have a very stated pro-social mission, meaning like they've taken a look at Maslow's needs hierarchy, or they've taken a look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals and said, we're going to solve that. And then they stand up an organization and a set of values and a mission around that. And then from there, they actually have to go live it. And that's right. Where we come in. As soon as folks get that they want their life and their career to be about something, that's where I work with leaders, CEOs, the whole organization to activate the purpose.
Okay. And is that some sort of like, is there a continuum, right? Like I know we demonize the oil and gas industry clearly because they're, very profit driven. I actually, full disclosure, come from a family that has been in the oil and gas industry since like the 40s, in Texas and Oklahoma, but very small, small, basically it's let's drill stuff on our land and sell it, sell it to the gas companies, right? Because it's mostly natural gas, not oil. But I'm interested to know, 'cause, like, if you have the obviously kind of more social businesses or social organizations, and then you have a very profit-driven organization, is there a continuum in which those things? And I'm guessing that this is part of what you guys do, like try to bring those closer together.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have mission without money. Right. You have to be able to generate profit. And we're at today, 2023 versus say where we were 10 years ago. You could kind of get by being just a profit oriented company and not face any repercussions. You were still within this kind of American dream, wealth uber alles type cosmology, this idea that like money is a good thing. Business is a good thing, regardless of what you're doing. But today, it's like 2/3 of employees, 2/3 of customers, and 2/3 of investors are like, no, we will not work that way. We will not buy that way. We will not invest that way. We realize climate change is a thing. Racial injustice is a thing. And we need to solve for those things. So it's not that, there is a continuum. It's just, where are you on that continuum, and how well are you meeting the moment? Like, because this is a different moment. We have climate change, we have political polarization, inequity, poverty, all these things, and most companies are not meeting the moment. They're just like praying that this whole woke business is going to go away, and it ain't.
And it does seem, and obviously woke is used as a completely derogatory term. And I tend to be more conservative, which is, neither here nor there, but it seems like so many of these companies now they don't have people like you to help direct them, right? Like, it's like, hey, let's hire a younger marketing person and then have her pull the woke card, for lack of a better term, and then see how that goes and see if that increases our viewership and, all that. I mean, right now, we're right in the middle of this Bud Light thing that's going on. And I know that you posted an article, that companies that are woke, quote unquote, are not going broke, which is the whole thing. Go woke, go broke, which is dumb. And I don't necessarily take offense, whether or not it agrees with me socially, and my own ideology. I don't necessarily take offense as a consumer to some of these things they do. I take offense as kind of a marketer, because I'm like, you're so full of crap. You guys are you're pulling this card to try to identify with someone that typically is probably not really your main focus and customer. Right. And so it's almost like they're putting on this new facade. The old facade was that we actually cared about stuff, but we really want to make money. Now we put on a facade that we do care about stuff, but really we just want to make more money. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, that is one of the things I love about conservatives, because they are so great at understanding integrity. Like, is there a match between the man, the mission, and the message? Like, or the company and the vision and the business. And you're absolutely right. I mean, they've greenwashed things, they've pinkwashed things, they've rainbow washed things. They've, what a colleague of mine calls whitewashing, just saying, oh, we're a purpose-driven company, when all they do is exploit people. Like,
yeah, we have a purpose. It's just, to make money.
Yeah, basically.
Which is nothing wrong with that. Capital, like you said, it takes money to do stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So there's like, there's an accountability and integrity issue that I think is at the heart of a lot of this anti-ESG backlash stuff. And of course, then there's all the, the hyperbole and the attention seeking around it. But there's actually some good points there. Like, a lot of these companies that are, on ESG investor lists, their core business is to make people unhealthy.
And this is a dumb question, but what is ESG? Sorry.
Sorry. That stands for environmental social governance. So
that's what I kind of figured. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what Wall Street, that's the current moniker for companies that are trying to care for the whole human at work, have sustainable supply chains, pay living wages, trying to point at something that is noble to achieve.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of these folks are not. I mean, their very business is to make people unhealthy. It's not just recent. Like you go back to Ben and Jerry's, that's like organic this and no bovine that. Like, dude, you're selling diabetes and heart attacks.
Right. Yeah. But we do it because we recycle cow crap, right? Like that's how we're good about it. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a big integrity issue.
That's it. Yeah. So, and are you, as one of the focuses to try to, I mean, do you just kind of write those companies off, or are you and focus more on the companies that are genuine and have integrity around their mission?
I'll put it this way. I've gone back and forth on this a number of times because on one level, like the work that we do is good for a certain type of leader, a certain type of organization to move them to the next level. So if I'm putting on my MBA hat, it's like, market niche, right?
Yeah.
But my heart is like, all of these people are human beings. None of them want to see the world on fire. None of them want to see the republic fall. None of them want to live a life that is uninspiring. So my co-founder and I, we were just talking about this today because I got invited to speak to a group of CEOs from a bunch of agriculture and manufacturing companies. And I'm like, odds are they're probably not our ideal customer. and she said, yes. And like, if we can crack that nut, we can potentially heal the nation. Like if we can figure out a way to bring empathy and purpose and inclusion into a conservative organization, potentially we might be able to lower the temperature somewhat and create a greater and stronger nation. So,
yeah. I mean, even like a company, I'm from farm and ranch. My dad was a farmer. His brother was a rancher. And so we're, old school agriculture. I'm not an agriculture person myself, but I live in a rural area of Montana. So there's tens of thousands of acres around me in farmland. A company like Monsanto, who is a big enemy of pretty much everybody, I think, if you look on one hand, GMOs have managed to make, to offer food in areas that otherwise would be completely impossible. That's something, or much more difficult and more costly. On the other hand, they strong arm farmers, run them out of business, try to monopolize everything. And, they're just, so it's like, on the one hand, we've made food sustainability a possibility, in probably a bad way, the way that they've gone about it. But on the other hand, we're trying to destroy the independent farmer through strong arm tactics and buying up, all the competition. Yeah. So that's, it's, these companies, I don't know how you get there. That's a difficult kind of gap to bridge.
Well, nobody's got there yet. So I think it's important to kind of remember two things. One, doing nothing is not the thing to do. You got to do something. You got to if you're going to be in right relationship to the moment, to your own personal values, to your faith, to your family, to your progeny, you got to do something because we all know it's broken. So I invite CEOs just to think of themselves like scientists. Well, let's try that. What do we learn from it? Let's try this. What do we learn from it? And just like keep testing and iterating. The other piece is that none of us are perfect. Like, on the left, folks are like, oh, Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's, Unilever. They're not perfect, and nobody's cracked it. So I think it's important for us to give ourselves grace. Like, let's stop beating each other up and start lifting each other up. Just try something new. Yeah.
I mean, it seems to be, it's interesting talking about continuums again. It seems to be, you've got this, right, left continuum, obviously, that's very strong. And it seems like on the right hand side of the continuum, we're all conspiracy theorists and hate hate everybody, think everybody's wrong, which is not true. And then everybody on the far left side of the continuum literally believes anything that CNN and mass media and NBC and Rachel Maddow tells them, right? Like, you know, they, like Patagonia and some of these, if they say they're doing good, then they're doing good, right? Like, so neither of those is true. So finding that middle ground and to be able to come together. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, you're kind of in the thick of all of this, you know, left, right, hatred kind of thing. I'm interested kind of your thoughts and your approach and kind of what we could do as individuals. And then we'll talk more about masculinity and all that, but I'm interested in that kind of thing. Cause I mean, genuinely, my kids are 24 and 25. I cannot imagine. And so I cannot imagine backing up 15 years. And we homeschooled our kids, so we kind of pulled them out of that mainstream stuff anyway, for the most part. I mean, we still traveled all over the world and all this stuff, so they were in it. They weren't the weird homeschool kids. So just say that. Well, side note on that, basically what homeschool does is if you're a weird kid and you're homeschooled, you're going to be even weirder. If you're a normal kid and you're homeschooled, you're probably going to be a normal homeschooler. So they're not all weird. But I cannot imagine trying to bring a child up in this it's just batshit crazy. Most of the stuff that's going on, whether it fits your ideology or not, it's still just nuts. Yeah.
So I forget the source of this, who said this. This could be biblical. But something that like, without a vision, the people will perish. And, you know, you and I, we grew up when there was it wasn't explicit vision, but we were pretty much like, you know, more democracy, more capitalism, more technology, probably a good thing. That's the game we're playing to, create a better world through economics, basically through global trade and innovation and all that. But I watched over the last 20 years that belief start to fade away. And not just in myself, but just talking with lots of folks.
Right.
And so there isn't a coherent vision, a coherent view of the world that kids, or really anybody, has to be like, am I doing the right thing? Is it aligned with this thing? And so I think it's imperative for all of us, especially those of us who have influence in leadership, to put forth a vision, even if it's imperfect. Because as long as we believe it, we believe that it's at least partially right. That's very healing, especially for young kids. They're like, okay, at least somebody believes that there is a way forward, even if they might not be right. And I'm happy you brought up the individual piece, because you and I are not, we're not the Rothschilds or whatever. Like we can't like literally dismantle a country or a system if we set our mind to it. But what we can do is drop down into our own purpose and values and act from that place, right? As opposed to our socialized identities, whether that's white, straight, black, gay, Republican, Democrat, boomer, millennial, Gen X, whatever. But like drop down into who we really are underneath that and connect with people that way. Yeah. Because A, it's more fulfilling for us, but B, we liberate ourselves from this tyranny of tribalism, of polarization, all that stuff. Like we're just like not playing that. Right. It's just human beings.
Which I don't think people know how to do anymore. Like I mean, where does tribalism even come from? I mean, is that so? Obviously, the political spectrum at the very top. All of our elected representatives. I mean, and it's been this way, and I think it continues to get worse. Obviously, they're complete self-serving. All they're worried about is themselves and their own pocket and all that stuff. And so that's from a country standpoint, that's where we have no vision, because their vision is, 2024 now. And that started that way in, 2020. And so where does in your travels and all that you do, where do you think that tribalism is really coming from? Because as an individual, like one of the things I love about this podcast is like I can sit and talk to somebody. I'm a conservative Christian, but I had a conversation with a sex addiction coach in the UK the other day. That's very on the very secular part of that, part of that continuum. So I'm not all that tribal. I'm a 50-year-old conservative Christian guy, white guy. So I have a very kind of, these are my rules and these are the things that I believe. But if you don't believe that same thing, let's have a discussion. It's, I have friends that are atheists and we can sit and have discussions about that and, talk about God and the Bible and all that stuff. And it doesn't at the end of the day, we're still going to go have lunch. Doesn't bother me. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're, you are very common. Most conservatives I know are that way. They're like, yeah, we go back. Like we're not going to burn down a relationship or burn down anything because we, have a different understanding of the way forward. And I think a lot of people are that way. Now, how did we get here is a bigger story, because it has begin to begin off people from the center, center left, center right, into these polls. Mm-hmm. The way I understand it, is that we are still very much in the middle of our civil rights movement. I think historians, a couple hundred years from now are going to be like civil rights movement from, 1865 to 2200 or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So we're in the middle of an identity crisis, and it, when we had this kind of, the American century after World War II, America was there was this huge kind of economic, philosophical, political powerhouse. And folks were like, it's not perfect, but look at what we're doing. We're going to the moon.
Right.
We invented the internet, the cell phone, all this cool stuff. Right. But what has become clear now that we're starting to dig back into some of the histories that were left out of the last century is that we were really only talking about white America then.
Yeah.
And when the Civil Rights Act of 65 happened, that's when we started to see this deep fray, meaning that not consciously, but folks in power began to believe a lot less in the collective and started to essentially dismantle the state. So the social welfare state, basically. And it's hypothesized because folks were like, we can't give the same stuff to black folks because they won't know what to do with it. At least that's the thinking that is hypothesized that was there. So we need to create private schools, private country clubs, private this, private that, private, gated communities, and just keep everything white and private. It wasn't some explicit conspiracy.
Right.
Although, they're...
As far as we know, it probably backdoor conversations, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lee Atwater, who I think worked with Reagan and Nixon, began to put forth a bunch of language that's called dog whistling, where we could say things around welfare queen and economic prosperity. And it would, even though it wasn't necessarily an anti-black thing, it had anti-black connotations. And that's how a lot of this stuff started to happen. So after the 60s, 70s, the state starts to basically decline. Private institutions rise, and things start to look really well for white folks, but not really for other folks. So that's what's going on the kind of the racial social dynamics. But then we have a couple critical breaks, meaning I forget when it was the I think 87, the FCC fairness doctrine was revoked, meaning until then, if you were going to use the people's airwaves, you had to present a balanced analysis.
Yeah.
And then that went away. And then we've got, Fox, CNN, MSNBC all saying different things about what's going on.
Well, because it's an entertainment industry, right? It's not not an education or news, or these aren't really news organizations anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing is, the public relied on that for their understanding of reality. And then the public started to fray into two camps. So that happened. And then the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, basically for online companies said, you can say whatever you want and you're not liable. And so we had these kind of two legislative things that was throwing, gasoline on a fire. It's now everyone lives in a different world.
And was there something financial? Why did they do that? Like, was something, obviously there's probably lobbyists involved somewhere. Was there a particular thing that they did in order to facilitate though?
So as I understand it, so Roger Ailes, I think he worked in either the the Ford or the Reagan administration. I'm not sure which, but he's like, we need a conservative voice to balance out what he judged as a liberal ABC, NBC, CBS. And there's some truth in that it was, journalists tend to have more of a liberal bent. And so there was some backdoor channeling to Reagan not to renew it so that we could have a conservative news organization called Fox. So I'm not saying that that's the only thing that happened, but that's one of the things that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you have Newt Gingrich during the Clinton administration basically instruct everybody in Congress who's conservative to spend as little time in DC as possible and as much time in your home state and never to negotiate. And it's like, we're at war. This is an enemy. And it really hasn't gotten any better. So you have essentially a lot of the bipartisanship that used to happen at the legislative level just evaporated during the Clinton years and really hasn't come back. So all those are kind of like the recent history of where we're at. Mm-hmm. And now we're at a place where, we've lost our standing on the world stage. The economy's in shambles. China and Russia are nuked to the gills and forming like their own bloc with the Middle East. And now with Guatemala or one of the Latin American countries are now teaming up with China on their currency. And I would not be surprised. Probably Venezuela.
Yeah.
Maybe
they're super, super corrupt already, but that's interesting.
So we essentially have like two worlds splitting. So we're seeing it at the global level, obviously at our national level, and we're seeing it inside companies. Obviously, we're seeing it inside families. Lots of families like broke up during the pandemic. Like that, American families like broke up. I saw it in my family. Like my liberal aunts divorced my conservative uncles. And
why? Because they didn't want to get vaccinated? No, didn't want to wear a mask, or they just spent too much time. They just spent too much time locked in the same house together, probably.
Yeah, what I mean is like the marriages didn't break up, but I'm saying like the siblings just went. Cleaved,
oh, right. Okay.
Cleaved. Yeah. So many American families have estrangement along political lines, and so we're fragmenting, and then you have kids like yours who are coming of age in this time when everyone is saying something different. Yeah. And so if there ever was a time for a unifying vision for like what this country is and what it could be, it's now. Same thing with planet, each family, each marriage. Yeah.
And it just, what a difficult thing. That leader doesn't seem to exist, right? Like we currently we have inept versus complete batshit crazy going on. Like it just like, it's very disheartening as an American, especially, middle-aged guy, and one of the things with my girls, one of my oldest daughter is married to a woman in the Army. And the irony is the two of them are much more conservative than my younger one, who lives in Atlanta. And she's a paramedic. And so with the younger one, they know where I stand. I know where they stand. Not a big deal. We align on a lot of things, but with the younger one, I always try to teach her, listen, I don't really care, where you are politically, what you believe and all that, but you need to understand why you believe it. Yeah. And to be able to articulate to me more than I heard it on this channel, or I read it on, or I, watched it on TikTok or whatever. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have now is that we've lost the ability to not only think for ourselves, but to also apply reason to the things that we're hearing. to go, wait a minute, that's just wrong. Like, does that even make sense what you're saying? And, you know, whether it's vaccines or masks or mandates or shutdowns or any of that stuff that came out of COVID, you know, it's like a lot of it was just like these people, there's people making a crap ton of money, and those are the people that are talking the loudest and have the most authority. That could be a bad thing.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's a very bad thing. Yeah.
And that seems to be kind of where our country is now. It's like, I don't like, what does it take? You know, the last time I remember anything being like cohesive would have been 9/11, right? Like they talk about that a lot to where, and when you talk about racial inequality, all of that kind of stuff still was a problem. But as far as like overall, let's stand together and kick somebody's ass, which evidently is something that resonates in America very well. That was kind of the last time. But, you know, to your point about Washington and Newt Gingrich and all that, Gingrich and what he was saying, we took our girls to Washington, D.C. back in 2008. We did a big tour around the United States, but
nice.
Adventures of, you know, advantages of being homeschooled. But like, it was amazing. They were like, Dad, these guys, all of these people look like the kids that we see in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. Like, first of all, they don't go to the floor ever. They do those votes by proxy, or they watch them on their TVs or whatever. And they argue, and like, it's just, and that was 15 years ago. Like, it's gotta be so much worse now. And what we're seeing.
Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah. I mean, you had said earlier that, like, where are the leaders, right?
Right.
We've run really great candidates in the primaries for, you know, president, you know, Ron Huntsman, Mitt Romney, on the Republican side, you know, folks on the, you know, identify or are part of the Democratic Party. It's like we can't get folks who are actually like wizened leaders to secure the nomination. So we end up having this like battle between, like, you know, like the lesser of two evils.
Well, that was 2020, right? It's like, I either stay home or I vote for the person I think is going to be best for me overall.
Yeah, I know.
You know, it's like, which bad person do we pick? It's, you know, it's tremendous.
A friend of mine is a Republican strategist in DC, and I think this is in 2015. We had lunch, and he's like, you know, the establishment candidate is Hillary Clinton, and less than 25% of the voting population voted for the establishment candidate, like in the primaries. Like,
right.
Everyone else either didn't vote or voted for Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. Like, so 75% of the nation is like, we don't want normal. Like, we have to shake it up. This ain't working.
Well, it didn't help that she's not very likable, but like, if she had been,
well, I mean,
right. Yeah.
I mean, it's,
I mean, not that Trump and Sanders are even more likable, but you know.
Yeah, they're all, like I said, we're all imperfect. We all deserve grace. And,
right.
But there were very few folks who really kind of brought forth a unifying message the way I judge that Huntsman and Romney attempted to. So we've got dysfunction kind of at almost in every sector of society right now. Yeah. And the last sector of society that is still trusted is the workplace. And that's where we spend all of our time. So there is a big opportunity for you leaders out there to present a coherent vision, at minimum, just for your company, but like for the nation. Be like, hey, like we're gonna heal this nation right here, inside.
And it seems like the way you guys are you based on what I was reading, it looks like you approach it from both ends, right? Bottom up and top down, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of getting them.
Yeah. So leaders have to first own that if they don't do anything, this republic is going to fall. So I don't know if you saw, but my last book last year was designed. So the Purposeful Nation was designed to move the heart of a CEO to say, like, what remains of this country is in your hands. If you don't fix it, it's going to fall apart. And because they have, tremendous power, not just with the lobbying, but with how they, in their supply chain, like the kind of world they're creating with those relationships, with how they treat their employees and how they develop their employees and build cultures where everyone can do their best. So that was my Hail Mary. I'm like, all right, CEOs, come on, step up.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm basically on like, an unconventional book tour, leading all these CEO groups, just like trying to get them to like take responsibility. Come on, guys, come on.
Right.
It's mostly guys, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, right. And how does that transfer to like a smaller business? Like you've got a guy that is a plumber and has 4 other journeyman plumbers underneath them or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to imply a lot more sophistication with the larger organizations,
right.
But with smaller organizations, it's really just trying to be like a mentor, coach, try to empower everyone to realize their potential, but also. So one of the things I lead CEOs through are like the 5 practices of purposeful leadership. So it's more than just that. You actually have to nurture the betweenness at each level. So meaning like the culture. And so it's working on the relationships, empowering them to actually lead the company and to like and trust one another.
And can you summarize those 5? I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if it's
don't have them
easy
up
to
in front of
summarize
me,
or
but
not. Oh, okay. Highlights.
Yeah. The first is you have to empower everyone to discover their purpose so they can find their unique and authentic connection to the mission in their role.
Okay.
So that's one. You have to empower the betweenness, so the connections at the peer level. And that's the work that we do at Unity Lab, working on those 2 primarily. You have to have a purpose-driven career development plan for each person. So depending on who they are and what they want to accomplish, providing them with the opportunities, the education, the resources they need to fulfill their purpose at your organization. And sometimes that means taking a stand for those who are historically disadvantaged. So like if you're a plumber and you've got 4 other white guys who went to your same high school working for you, you might think about that 4th one being somebody who's not that like that.
Yeah.
So they can develop relationships across difference. And then you also have to measure it. That's the other piece.
Right.
It's
like,
treat culture as important as profitability, top line growth and margins.
Right. And how do you what are your thoughts on this whole, like the trying to combine hiring the right person and celebrating some diversity with that? Because I know one of the big criticisms that they're saying now is that they're hiring, in the Biden administration, for example, is they seem to be hiring people like that FAA guy, right? Like the guy didn't even know basic aviation, concepts, but he fit a particular profile and that's why they picked it. So, and I assume that tendency could exist within a large organization, especially. Smaller organizations probably less so.
Yeah.
But how do they deal with that? Obviously in government, they're just all weird. So, but like from a CEO standpoint, right?
Yes and no. I think they're like everybody else. They just have weird hiring and firing things because it's depending on political elections and appointments.
Right.
But once the top leadership is set, it's just like any other organization. With probably a lot more accountability and transparency than most. But so I'll put it this way, like the easy choice for, say, adding someone to your team is going to pick somebody who has a similar background. So you both played high school football, or you both are fans of the Minnesota Vikings, or whatever it is. And that would be fine if we were a racially homogenous nation, like Finland or something like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're not. We're a racially diverse or a multiracial nation, and we have a sacred covenant to become the very first multiracial democracy where all created equal is basically the first commandment of this religion called the United States, and then life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if we want to be an American company, our company needs to look like America. It needs to function like America's supposed to function. Otherwise, it's just kind of a white guy company that happens to be in America.
Right. And are there cultural differences? I mean, in some, it seems like statistics would show that there are some vocations that are predominantly white, which is, I don't want to say systemic racism at all, but there could be there may be cultural reasons for that. And so there may be some challenges there, but I think you want to, when you're looking, and it's a hard thing, right? Like you can't just say, hey, I want to hire a black guy. Because that's, first of all, it's illegal.
It's illegal.
You can't even, like, even if your intention was to be more diversity oriented in your company, you're technically not even allowed to do that, clearly it's done every single day, but.
Well, you're not allowed to specify this role must be an African-American or someone who's LGBTQIA+. But what you can say is we encourage diverse candidates to apply. Mm-hmm. You can focus your recruiting dollars on places where those folks are. So historically black colleges, for example, and universities.
Okay.
And you can create management leadership accelerator paths that privilege folks from historically excluded backgrounds. So all that's legal, and that's basically what the Fortune 1000 are doing, attempting to, anyways.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. That's good to know. My wife is, she's been involved in a ton of all female, car builds for SEMA. SEMA's, I don't know if SEMA is the Specialty Equipment Manufacturing Association trade show that happens every November. Mm-hmm. It's the largest, basically aftermarket car show, trade show in the world, but and it's kind of like this really cool thing to have your vehicle on the floor at SEMA and different booths and stuff. So she's been involved in several builds that are all female builds.
Cool.
And so these are all female welders, painters, mechanics, car builders, hot rod girls, and all that. And so diversity in terms of gender became a really interesting thing for me to learn about. And the other thing that was just a side note on that the reverse sexual harassment was also interesting, being the only guy running around some of these shops. Some of those ladies are worse than any guys that I've seen, but it's to see if you're a female welder, man, you, first of all, most likely are, female make much better TIG welders, which is the two-handed welding. My wife just did a course on TIG welding, and we know a lot of TIG welders, but that diversity, but they're not going out of their way. These companies in general are not going out of their way to hire females, as in order to diversify their company. Yeah. It's usually white guys,
Yeah.
So.
And there's, what we've seen is like, there's certain industries that lend themselves to wanting that. Consumer goods, media services companies are that way because they have this public brand that needs to be open to all sorts of folks, like, Budweiser, for example.
Yeah.
Folks that or organizations that are on the coast tend to be more inclined towards that. Folks that have professional services companies, they oftentimes have mandates. Like they actually can't, say, do an audit if for a federal agency, if it's an all-white, company. So, which
Montana companies would be completely screwed, by the way.
They would be screwed. Yeah.
We have it's like 3% or less of the state of this state and Idaho are black. Like we just don't have black people that live here, and it's a cultural thing, I think. I had a really good black friend that was from the University of Miami here, and he's like, black people don't like cold. So that was from him, and I don't know if that has, white people don't like cold either, but yeah, that would be the diversity in an area like ours is damn near impossible, honestly.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with like the rural urban stuff, because it generally, if there's going to be a migration of folks to an area. It's going to be a place where there are higher paying jobs. That's typically around urban centers.
Right.
So you have like cities being a place where this is important. And then you have the coasts, and then you have certain industries. And then lots of other folks are trying to figure it out in the heartland. But yeah, it ain't easy. I mean, this is like the hardest job in the company after the CEO is who's ever running HR or diversity and inclusion. Like they are stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, that's got to be a challenging thing. I'm interested because I know you talk a lot about masculinity. And one of the things we try to do, what I'm trying to do is kind of help guys redefine what, not only what success looks like, but what masculinity looks like. My shirt right now says masculinity is not toxic. Some men just suck. And because now masculinity I talk a lot about these young guys, and it's almost like these young boys / young men are afraid of even becoming a man because it's almost like a dirty word to have masculinity. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just share a little bit about my background.
And we don't have to agree. If you disagree, whatever, that's cool too.
No. I mean, that's fine as well. But growing up in the Midwest in the, 70s, 80s, 90s, it's kind of like growing up in the 50s on the coast. Like especially we're in the Chicago area, like very racially divided.
Right.
Every joke was a racial joke, a homosexual joke, an Islamic joke, a Polish joke. I mean, it's just like we just made fun of all the difference.
Right.
And by the time that I had got to high school and college, I was pretty much its poster boy. Like I was, rude and sensitive. I said all these terribly like racial, sexist jokes, all this kind of stuff. And well, in my heart, my values are not toxic, but the way I was enculturated was, through family, through sports, through my high school. Like I became this version of a young person, a young male that was like pretty offensive. Like nobody wanted to be around me except for people who were like me or people who wanted something from me. So in my late 20s, I began to do the inner work and began to see that who I was not that guy. And I'm still unlearning a lot of stuff. I still find myself on the street thinking racist thoughts, thinking sexist thoughts. And yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. There are very few models of masculinity that are, I'll put it this way, aspirational models of masculinity that isn't some kind of like alpha male thing.
Right.
So I was like excited to be on this, like maxed out. I'm like, I'm very curious to see like what maxed out means.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to share that like I don't think there's that big of a difference between men and women. Of course, there's physical stuff, there's hormonal things, there's giving life, there's all that stuff. But
right.
What I have experienced I guess my wife and I have been together for 8 years, give or take, that our growth journeys have been pretty similar. Like we've internalized a lot of like, unhealthy behavior, unhealthy beliefs, and we're just unwinding that and just becoming whole humans that are, increasingly less reflective of the current culture. Right. So, I mean,
which is a good goal.
Yeah. I mean, we sometimes joke. She's like, "You're the woman in the relationship." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Because like I want to cuddle and I want to talk about my emotions, and she's like, "Oh God, all right, fine."
Yeah. That's funny. Well, I've been married almost 28 years. Nice. And Congrats. So we have grown, and we've been married now much longer than we were not married in our lives. And so we've literally grown up together. And I think, it's one of those things, and I get teased for the same thing. He's the girl, and it could be because I'm much more vain about my appearance and my hair and showering and all that kind of stuff. But they give me I'm a metrosexual. I don't think we're allowed to use that term anymore, but that was like from the 2010s.
Yeah. I don't even remember like what was so bad about that. Like, 'cause
I know. It's like, what do you mean? You take care of yourself? Like I think it was to imply that you were like, had all the styling and personal care things of a homosexual male, but you were straight. So I think that was which is fine, but I still take care of myself, which is a good thing. I think, from a masculinity standpoint, I think I had just did a podcast with a guy that talks about coaching and talks a lot about what you're talking about, which is, getting to know your feelings and kind of bringing that out. And we had talked about that. I think there is a balance between, there's nothing inherently wrong with that alpha male part of masculinity. I think it just needs to be in balance. Like if that's and I think it's also important not to wear that as a persona, like I'm going to be, cause like, for me, I build cars, I do construction, but I'm also a musician and I write stuff and all of those kind of things. And, I talk about my feelings with my wife and express things to my daughters and all of that. So I'm kind of like, not a I don't know. They used to use the term Renaissance man, but I tend to be very middle brained, as I put it. I'm not particularly right brain. I'm very logical, very left brain, but I'm also kind of in touch with that more creative, more feminine side. But I think that I had a discussion with my youngest daughter. And again, that's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Where you got this stuff. But she had made the statement essentially that all football players were rapists. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? She was like, well, football in general has a culture. It has a rape culture built into it. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. I think that if we teach these young men that women have only one value, especially teenage girls, and they can just take that at any time, then yeah, that's definitely a rape culture. But I don't think that it inherently has that. But I think that the point I'm making is that it's being, in balance and teaching, especially with these young guys. Like I don't have exposure to a lot of young men these days. But we do some, we do some marriage counseling with some young families and all that. Nice. So people in their 20s and early 30s, but especially these, guys that are 17, 18, 20 years old, trying to help them become more than, the world is telling them that they can be. And that's kind of the point of Maxed Out Man, is not necessarily for those guys, but for guys our age that spend all day sitting on the couch on Saturday watching college sports and spend all day Sunday watching pro sports, and their family is neglected and their wife is taking the kids to baseball practice and by yourselves and all that. And so it's like maximizing your potential as a guy.
Well, Kevin, I love just everything you just said. I mean, that completely resonates with me. Like the sense of balance and the sense of like, when I hear Max, I'm like, becoming like your fullness, like about the whole part of being a man. Cause like being a man is awesome.
Yeah.
Being a boy is awesome. Like and I'm not saying being a girl or woman isn't, but I don't have experience.
We don't have that experience.
Yeah, right? I don't have that experience. And there's a book that came out, I think in the 80s, I think, called, you've probably heard of it, Lover, Warrior, Magician, King.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And it looks at kind of archetypes as a way to like balance the fullness of masculinity. So yes, we have the warrior around, being clear, accountable, in service, showing up, not leaving till the job's done, all that good stuff. But we also have the king, like the sovereign, that is supposed to be like thinking about the realm and picking his head up every now and again and be like, is this really working? Are we doing the right thing? Like the philosopher, the contemplator. But then we have, the lover, which, some might regard as feminine, but, it's showing up present, being caring, allowing ourselves to feel sadness and joy and all that, all the kind of like the traditionally softer things, but that's
Right.
part of us too. Then we have this magician that is about our own transformation, like surrendering to something bigger than ourselves, whether that's our soul, our God, the universe, whatever it is. Like, show me the way, like provide me with some clarity. And so when we develop ourselves in an archetypally balanced way, we become more of ourselves. And that's same true for women. They've got similar archetypes there too.
Yeah.
And, we've seen a lot of, women embody some of like the older, more patriarchal masculine qualities. You talked about Hillary being not likable. I think a lot of folks ascribe that aspect to her. So I 100% agree. It's about accessing the fullness of who we are. Like when I lead men's circles, we frequently do a PIES check-in, and that's physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. And so we're trying to like bring awareness to all these different realms of what it means to be us. And because at least I wasn't raised with that, we have to reparent ourselves in that whole more archetypally balanced way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I love, because all of those parts of us, I think we tend to lean in, especially men who are so success driven, and we love the things that we know. We know of ourselves as this tough guy or whatever. So we lean into that, and I think one of the things with being, I've been married for so long now, like I've become so much of a part of her and she a part of me that we're able to share that. And I think those types of relationships are super important, and having those relationships with other men in terms of that deeper connection, being able to say, hey, what's going, oh, I'm great. I'm like, well, you're full of crap. First of all,
either you're asleep or you're lying.
Yeah, because none of us are okay. We're all freaking, self-absorbed, self-esteem messes as men for the most part, and as people in general. But I think really trying to align ourselves with that part of us and trying to bring that stuff out, I think is super important. So, but I've kept you for quite a while. But I really appreciate your insight and especially on this stuff. But it's these we live in an interesting culture, and I love that you guys are really trying to change the culture from inside out and top down, and hopefully that'll start to resonate with some people. It
is. I mean,
person to person,
and I think just from looking at men stepping into the work, it's exploded. I mean, when I first started doing men's work 18 years ago, there were like 2 organizations. Now there's like 10.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of men are craving this. They're craving the company of grown-ass men. They're craving an initiatory pathway into their fullness. And I know there's a lot of great men's organizations that operate within Christian faith communities as well. And so like I'm hopeful. I also I'm also afraid that because if men don't do their inner work and start to bring their fullness out, they're going to continue to suffer. And as you know, many of us have access to ammonium nitrate and AR-15s, and shit can go bad pretty quickly. So I have a lot of fear too.
Yeah, I mean, it is a scary time because it's hard to really see. It's hard to stay positive about a path out. Right. Yeah. And a path, and, not out, but like you say, forward. I think it's difficult to see that path and see where we can go next. But I think, I don't know, it's conservative Christians like myself get a bad rap because there's so many crazy ones. And I think there's a lot of crazy liberals too. But it's like, for whatever reason, those are the ones that they love to put on TV. And in all reality, if you don't believe the same thing as me, we can still have a really interesting conversation, and if you want to go to church with me to see what things are about, great. I posted on Easter. I'm like, the true meaning of Easter and the resurrection and guy coming back from the dead. I said, it's weird and it's wonderful and it's restorative and it's resetting. Like it's weird, right? Like that's how that is, but that's what we believe and that's our faith. And it's what many of us based our life on. And But that doesn't mean if you're an atheist that we can't have a conversation and still be friends. One of my closest friends is an atheist, and we both, and it's just, we talk a little bit about it, but and he's very liberal, and we can have these conversations. And at the end of the day, we're still going to give each other a hug and have lunch next time. Like, it doesn't, the media would have, on both sides, would have you believe that you're the most right, and everyone else is a complete moron. Yeah. And heartless. You know, if you're a conservative, you're heartless and money loving and gun toting and all of that stuff. And if you're a liberal, you don't shave your legs, you want to kill all babies, you know, whatever else that you want to say, you know. And I think it's great to be able to, from a male standpoint with men, because we are typically the leaders in a community. We're typically leaders in our own families. You know, not necessarily like sometimes it's out of balance, but like that's kind of our role. That's what we're meant to be: strong leaders, providers, those kind of things. And again, I'm not saying that women can't be that. And I'm not saying that it's not. My wife and I share almost every responsibility, and, you know, for the most part, she tells me what to do. So we'll just pretend. I joked this morning. I said, "Hey, because I was having a business meeting with two women via Zoom, and they were telling me what to do." And I was like, "Dude, I've been married for 28 years. I pretty much do what any woman tells me to do." So but you know what I mean? Like, if that's our role, and we need to do it to the best of our abilities, and within the framework that we're not just alpha males asserting authority without any heart. Yeah.
You know, I'm still kind of wrestling with that myself, because I feel, you know, the desire to protect and provide. But the thing is, my wife does too. I mean, right now she's making more money than me, and I'm totally fine with that. And so I'm in the inquiry right now of like, how do I reclaim this protector provider, you know, being married to a very strong, successful woman. That's, it's an open question for me right now.
Yeah. 'Cause it's difficult to not feel emasculated. And honestly, it's your responsibility, but your responsibility together to make sure that that's known. You understand your challenges there, because I mean, it is, that's a difficult position for a lot of guys to be in, because that's kind of like, a lot of guys are in that position. Yeah. A lot of guys are in that position. Yeah. And so it's to kind of come to terms and to figure out the best way to approach that, and how to serve your wife in the best possible way. Yeah. So that she can be the best that she can be too. So absolutely. Amen. But man, this is awesome. I don't know if you have any other closing thoughts you want to share with everybody, so we can.
Well, I mean, what, you know, I shared about my connection with men's work, and I strongly encourage anyone listening to this, watching this, to go get involved in a men's organization that has a charter to develop men into their fullness. The one I've been a part of, the Mankind Project, is a very good one. It's probably one of the older, more established ones. But there's Sacred Sons, there's Everyman, there's Sterling, there's, you know, a bunch of local ones. But get involved, get in relationship with other men who are doing the work. Yeah. And you'll find a lot of camaraderie, support, and growth. Like, men, if we're good at anything, it's pushing each other. You know, as they say, right. Iron sharpens iron, right? Yeah. So get in. That's awesome.
And how do you, so that's, you know, there's nationwide organizations, obviously your, you know, men's group at a church. If you're in a small church like mine, you don't necessarily have that. There are other churches in the area, or there's just civil organizations and nationwide organizations, or just pick somebody else that kind of is involved in your community, whatever community it is, whether it's hunting or, you know, computer stuff or engineering or whatever it happens to be. But you can reach out to somebody, have coffee with them, and get that started as well. How do people find you? How do people learn more about you?
So my name, BrandonPeele.com, is where like kind of the central place for all my speaking, you know, programs. There's links to my company there as well, my books, all that good stuff. Also, we'll just,
and that's Peele.
Peele.
There you go.
Yeah. And then also the Mankind Project, that's mankindproject.org, is a really good organization.
Okay, great. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time. I've learned a lot here. I feel we could talk, half the afternoon. So I look forward to connecting with you more and getting to know you better. And I appreciate your patience with some of the technical issues and all that too. So, all right, buddy.
All right. Take care, Kevin.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.